going to talk about what I read this month. Now, there's a couple of books I won't be discussing because I'm going to be using them for a vlog, like a future vlog. So I won't be talking about them. So the first one I went and read this month, there was two by the same author. So the first one was Tower by Claire Kent. This is it's a post-apocalyptic fairy tale. Now she wanted to go and do short novellas that were all based on like fairy tales, you know, like almost kind of like a retelling. This one here had to do with Rapunzel, because the woman had really long hair. So this one here, we have the characters of Haley and Levi. Now there's age gap and there's spanking in here, you know, for one of the tropes. I'd say like the majority of all Claire Kent books are pretty much age gaps, and they're usually with the male being the older person. Most of these are age gaps. Some of them are not that much of an age gap, like maybe like a few years or so, and then some are more. So it all depends on which one you get into. But this one here, I would say the content warnings for it were transactional relationship, attempted sexual assault was in here, kidnapping, groping, physical violence, things like that. Because you're dealing with a post-apocalyptic world, you know, law and order is pretty much not there. So I said, this is basically 3 years after Impact, and Haley just lost her father to a heart attack. And he has been protecting her ever since Impact. Her mother died 18 months before due to sickness. She knows that she will not survive on her own unless someone is protecting her. So she decides to go to Levi and asks him to protect her, and in exchange, she will do whatever he wants of her. So I said, I enjoyed this quick novella. Of course, these characters develop feelings very quickly, and there are some small nods to the story of Rapunzel up in her tower, which was cute. It had like little small nods to the story of Rapunzel, but not like, it didn't overshadow like the rest of the story. This is pretty much like, if you have enjoyed Claire Kent's Kindled series, I think you would still enjoy this one here, because this one pretty much has it to where it's in like the same type of universe, I would say, where it's a post-apocalyptic world, you know, a few years after the asteroid hit. So of course, you know, things are not great. Obviously the sky is still kind of like not really good. Like, obviously it takes time for the sky and everything to kind of like go back to normal, you know, it's normal rotation and everything. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to like basically find food and different things like that. So she's living in this area with her father, and so her father pretty much protected her and kept her like indoors, because, you know, he just didn't trust like anybody would try to harm her, you know, or do other despicable things. So he pretty much kept her under lock and key. But he did tell her before he died, like, hey, you know, you're going to want someone, you know, if something happens to me, you're going to want someone to protect you, you know? And so he had kind of like told her of different people, and one of them he had talked to was about Levi, and said Levi was, you know, obviously, you know, he wasn't a bad person, you know? So she pretty much was like, well, I'm going to go to him, because he's pretty much, I think he was called the boss. They called him boss, you know, in the book. And so he pretty much was the one that was kind of running the area. And 'cause they were more of like kind of like a biker gang. And they were staying in this like, kind of like a hotel type of thing, or a motel. And so he would go to like the lake in the morning, and or the river, wherever it was, and he would clean himself and, you know, kind of like get away and everything. Because it's, you know, a lot of pressure to be that type of person where you pretty much took over the lead role of like telling other people what to do. And also, you know, you got to be very intimidating, you know, because people could decide, hey, you know, I want to be the leader, you know, so you have to like, you got to know how to defend yourself. You got to know how to, you know, take care of yourself in order to kind of like stay up on that hierarchy, you know, because someone else is, if they think they can knock you down, they're going to do it. So he pretty much has intimidated enough people in the area to know you don't want to mess with him. You know, you don't want to mess with boss. So she decides to go to him and say, hey, you know, if you protect me, you know, I will do whatever it is you want me to do. So it's pretty much like she will sleep with him if it means, you know, he's going to protect her. So, you know, obviously during that, you know, she, you know, I'd say kind of like fluffs things up to make it look like that, you know, he's more of the kind of like boss, even like in the bedroom and all that stuff, you know. She kind of makes it kind of like known like, oh, you know, he tells her what to do type of thing. But he's really like more sweet with her, and he even told her like, you don't have to do that, you know, like we don't have to be intimate, you know, like I'll still protect you, you know, we don't have to be intimate. And she was like, no, I want to, you know, I want to. So there was that, and it was, you know, it's very similar to some of her other stories, you know, where it's like, you know, there was like Homestead pretty much kind of had that same type of thing too, when I'm part of the Kindle series, where it's very much a more transactional type of thing, and then as time goes by, feelings manifest. So I enjoyed it. You know, I gave her 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I'd say like most of her books, I give a 4 or 5 stars too. There's every now and again I'll find something that just didn't hit it out of the park for me. But this one here I thought was good. And then there's a Cinderella retelling that's gonna, you know, happen. That will be like the next book. But they're pretty much all within that same type of atmosphere. So it's like you almost could put these like with the Kindle series because they're very similar, you know, when it comes to, obviously it's in a different area. You're thinking like there's going to be like a little bit of a different area of, you know, that. So yeah, I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. Okay, so this one here, I need to read the first book because this is the second book in the series. So I need to go and read the first book, because I think I tried reading the first book and I ended up DNFing that one a while ago. And so I'm like, I need to get back in and see if I can get through that book. But this one here, I picked this one up. I have the physical copy of this. I picked this one up at Barnes & Noble, and I was hoping that I was going to like it. And I did enjoy it, but I did have issues with it. I will just say that. My review for this one is longer because I had issues. I had issues. So I ended up reading Seeing Red by Bailey Hanna. So we got the characters of Cassidy Bowman and Chase Red Thompson. Everybody calls him Red because he's got red hair. So typical, you know, red. So the tropes for this is one night stand and there's accidental pregnancy in here. The content warning, I would say the heroine has PCOS and Hashimoto's disease. Now, I wrote down information on those in case anybody doesn't know what those were. I put those in my, I looked them up and I put them in my review. So it says PCOS is basically polycystic ovary syndrome. It says it's a problem with hormones that happens during the reproductive years. If you have PCOS, you may not have periods very often, or you may have periods that last many days. You may also have too much of a hormone called androgen in your body. So it can cause, like, obviously issues when it comes to your cycle. Like either your cycle doesn't come very often, or you can have obviously maybe longer periods and things like that. So it could be kind of an issue. And they said some women can have trouble like reproducing if they have PCOS. I guess it depends on the, the severity of it, maybe, And Hashimoto's disease is an autoimmune disorder affecting the thyroid gland. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland located at the base of the neck just below the Adam's apple. So it says the thyroid produces hormones that help regulate many functions in the body. An autoimmune disorder is an illness caused by the immune system attacking healthy tissues. In Hashimoto's disease, immune system cells lead to the death of the thyroid's hormone-producing cells. The disease usually results in a decline in hormone production. So hypothyroidism is what usually will cause it. So that can kind of make you, if you usually have like more hypothyroidism, it could be harder for you to lose weight, keep the weight off, things like that. So she is more of a plus size heroine. So she's got a little, meat to her bones. So Cassidy is getting over a breakup with a guy who chose to cheat on her with one of her friends. She also lives in a small town where she knows everyone, so she feels like her pickings for a new man are slim. Chase Red Thompson is someone she has known since school, and she has had issues with because he likes to get into bar fights and he shamelessly like flirts with her. Like he flirts with her and he he doesn't like, they weren't really like close in school, but she knew of him and like, he'd see her from time to time and like kind of like wink at her and things like that and kind of like do a little flirting. But she really just couldn't stand him. Like just didn't like him because he'd constantly start fights with like, something would go on and there'd be a fight would break out in her father's bar and all that stuff. So it caused like issues for her. So one night Cassidy sees her ex with his new girlfriend. So she wants to get back at him. So she ends up enlisting Red's help and they end up having sex on top of her ex's car. 8 weeks later, Cassidy finds out that she's pregnant and she knows that the father is Red. Rumors get around town that Cassidy is pregnant. So Red decides to go to her place to confront her. Once he finds out he's going to be a dad, he is shocked but also excited because he wants to be a dad, and he's also, happy because he has had a crush on Cassidy since school. He never thought he had a chance with her because of his family history with the town, and most of the townspeople look down on him. So I said, I enjoyed this book, but there were times Cassidy and her father annoyed me. Oh, Cassidy, I had issues with this girl. Oh, there were times that I wanted to slug her in the face. I really did. She frustrated me and her father. Her dad too. Yeah. Because they kept judging Chase. I said, and it wasn't until towards the end that Cassidy realized she was being dumb. And I'm like, durr. You dumb bitch. I said, because Chase kept proving to her time and time again that he would be there for her and their daughter. I said, this man had been smitten with her for years, but she never looked in his direction and noticed that he had liked her for a long time. She was too busy being snobby and judgmental towards the poor guy. I said, her father did the same thing when he shouldn't talk because his wife, Cassidy's mother, chose to leave them when Cassidy was younger, so he should have realized that just because your parent is crap, it doesn't mean that the child will turn out the same way. So yeah, her dad and her were both little judgmental assholes. Because it's like, you would kind of think like, why does he keep starting fights? What's his reason? What's wrong with him? What makes him tick? Let's find out. Let's investigate. Dude, why do you keep starting fights? Ask him. So you come to find out, like, Chase's father was an alcoholic douchebag that would abuse his wife and children. He was a fucking piece of shit. So, it's made Chase a bit high-strung. And he basically didn't want to being looked at in the same light of his father, you know, and his family. They ended up moving when he was about 16 or so, out of the small town and into like the city, and he didn't like it. So he ended up asking his friend's family, you know, his friend's father, if he could stay with them. And they basically took him in. It was what was the Wells Ranch or something like that, I think it was called. Yeah, a Wells Ranch novel. So the Wells family, they had basically took him in and were taking care of him. So he became a part of like their family. And so I appreciated them that they took him in, and you know, and everything. And he just dealt with, you know, a lot of trauma. You know, you're talking about what you grow up with as a kid, that determines how you want to be as an adult. So you're either going to be that same type of person and follow that same path of your parents. Like, you know, my grandfather, which I never knew, he died when I was about 1, so I never got to know him. He was a functioning alcoholic. He would never hit his kids, but he would, you know, it was more of a verbal abuse, that type of thing. And he put his family through that type of situation because he was a functional alcoholic. Because he would go to work and he'd work his job, he'd take care of his kids, take care of his wife, but he'd come home and he'd drink beer and get drunk. You know, it runs in my family. There's a lot of my cousins. I had uncles. My Uncle Willie was, you know, he was an alcoholic. He was, he was out there. He was out there. Fighting cops, you know, type of person. Yeah. My family, my grandfather, his brothers, you know, his siblings and all that stuff, were pretty wild. And there's a lot of craziness that came from like my grandfather's side, my grandmother's side. So there's a lot of drama. So yeah, a lot of them were functioning alcoholics. But you find out my great grandfather was an abuser. My great grandfather used to beat the shit out of my grandfather. And so when my grandfather was older and he's like, I want to have kids of my own, he didn't want to ever touch his kids. He's like, I will never hit my kids. And he never did. My grandmother was the disciplinarian. She was the one that would correct the children. He would yell, but that was about as much as he did. You know, it was, I'd say, more of a verbal abuse, not physical abuse. But he never wanted to hit his kids because he used to get beat as a kid. He used to get the crap beat out of him by his father. So he was one where he did not want to follow that same cycle, and he broke the cycle. Now, you know, I would say he could have not drank, you know, because he was a functioning alcoholic. He could have chose to not do that because he still ended up impacting his children in a negative way with him being a functioning alcoholic. So, if you're going to have children, don't take out your shit from your past and bring it into your life. You know, whatever happened to you as a child, it doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. It doesn't mean that you have to go down that same path. Change the path. You know, like I have a bunch of people in my family that are alcoholics. I dated somebody who was an alcoholic, who was a functioning alcoholic until he wasn't functioning anymore. So when it comes to alcoholism, I have a real trigger for it. I have a real trigger for it because I don't like being around drunk people. I don't like being around people who, when they're, what's the term? Like when they're, you know, nice and loose and their inhibitions, I guess you'd say, their inhibitions, they say things that are not very nice. So witnessing that, dealing with that with my own ex, and, you know, hearing stories over the years of like how different cousins were, different uncles were, things like that, it really makes you not want to go down that path. So this is why I've chosen to where I've drunk before, I've gotten drunk before, but I don't like the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel like, you know, I don't have a sense of like control of myself, and not in a way of like, I'm gonna hurt somebody or anything like that. It's, I can't see straight when I drink. You know, I see even worse. I'm like, my vision's even worse when I'm drinking. I talk too much. Like, you think I talk now, I talk even more, you know? So I don't like the feeling of being drunk. I don't care for it. So this is why I choose not to go down that path. And I don't smoke, you know, because I already have like bronchitis and everything like that. I don't need to make it worse. And I don't get into drugs and all that stuff. I choose to remain more, I guess you'd say, straight edge, or whatever they used to call it back in the day. I try to remain away from all that stuff because I've seen what it does to people. It ruins people's lives. So I chose not to go down that path. And if people think, oh, I'm boring because I don't get into that stuff, why do you need to get into that stuff? Why do you feel the need to drink all the time? Why do you feel the need to smoke and do drugs? What is it from your childhood that's causing you to go down this path to where you need all of these vices to choose that path? Why? You have to go and look in internally and realize, why do I do this to myself? Because you're hurting yourself. You're hurting yourself with this stuff, and then you hurt others around you. You don't think maybe you do, but you do. So with this here, it's like Cassidy could have chosen to ask him questions. Maybe he'd be more upfront about it, you know? Instead, she chose to judge him through most of the book. And it really, really infuriated me. I still enjoyed the book. I still gave it a good rating, but it was because of Red. Because of him. I loved his character. He was such a good man and was trying to do better and be a better person. Once he found out she was pregnant, oh my God, he was gung-ho. He was so gung-ho to be a dad, and like, I got her pregnant, and he worshipped like basically the ground she walked on. And I was like, dude, why? Why? You give her more credit than what she deserves. You know, she was annoying. And I wasn't the only one either. Like I will find you a review. There was a review I had saved, and I was like, oh my God, yes. Now, all of this stuff, like I said, she infuriated me. I still enjoyed the book, and I gave it a good rating, but I understand why people gave it a low rating. I completely understand. So this person, who is named Witchling, she did her review. She gave it 1 star. She goes, knocking it down yet again. We're now at a 1 out of 5 because Bailey Hanna insists on acting like a garbage human being on social media. I didn't know about any of this. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was on Instagram. I don't know if it was on like Threads or whatever it is. I don't know. All I'm going by is what this person's review was, which they did the review in June of 2025. So I don't know what drama happened. I try to stay out of that shit. I mean, really, blatantly attacking people for any reason, but specifically because they didn't like one of your books, is beyond fucking childish. You should be embarrassed by your behavior. Dell Romance should be embarrassed by your behavior. Such a terrible example of how a professional author should behave. Since initially writing this, I've knocked my rating down 1 star because the author has been acting very inappropriately on social media. Trolling people who disliked your book is disgusting behavior, and you should be ashamed of yourself. Do better. So I thought I would kind of like show that author was acting like behaving badly because she was getting bad reviews. But there were people, let me see if I can find another one. There were people who were talking about Cassidy and how annoying they thought her character was. And I was like, same. I really disliked Cassidy throughout like at least half or most of the book. And she finally did come around, and where I'm like, okay, girl, I like you better because you really were annoying the fuck out of me. I really wanted to smack her upside her head. I really did. But let me see. What were the other people? That person was complaining about the author. Okay, this person gave it 2. And her name is Brit Footnotes and Whimsies. She said, if you love this book, you probably don't want to read this review. Fair warning. If it weren't for doing a buddy read, I would have DNF'd. But I powered through a rage read, and now I have a fully formed opinion. It's not great. I still give it 3 stars because Red and the Wells Ranch family deserve that recognition. I agree. Like I said, I liked Red. I loved his character. I loved his character. And I liked all the other people, the Wells family. After seeing the author's behavior on social media, I dropped a star. Let me first say it's not because of the pregnancy trope. Is it my fave? No. But I've read some good ones, so I know it can be done. Also, let me say that I'm a woman who has been pregnant twice, delivered 2 babies, one of which resulted in a 54-day NICU stay, so I've got some first-hand experience, and I know not everyone's pregnancies are the same, but hormones are not an excuse to be a terrible person. Yup. Which brings us to Cassidy Bowman, who was a bitch to Red before pregnancy, just saying. She didn't think it was important to tell Red herself that she was pregnant. This was the problem I had, too. Yes. I had a problem with that. The rumors had spread. And this is how Red found out. Because I was like, girl, were you even going to tell him that you were pregnant? Huh? Were you going to say anything? Yep. Instead, letting small town rumors fly, and when he does confront her about it, her response is, I'm not a complete thunder cunt, so I'll let you buy shit for the baby if you seriously want to be involved. That's it. Ugh, sorry, honey. But that does make you a thunder cunt. Author's word, not mine. Says then 2 seconds later, she's telling Red she already went to the doctor, that he had every right to go, and she guesses he can have the second ultrasound picture that she was planning to give to her dad, then seemed annoyed when he accepted it, just beyond rude. Yeah. And speaking of her father, Dave, anyone who advocates for only one parent to be involved in a child's life is a garbage human being. I agree. Yep. He is so judgmental of Red due to Red's father's past actions, which makes absolutely no sense because when Red rightly points out that his logic means Cassidy will be a terrible mother, he's quick to say, no, you're not a smart person, Dave. And this is the other thing I had issues with. Because of the issues I had with her father, I had these issues to where Cassie grew up without her mother because her mother chose, I don't want to be a mom, which can happen. Just because you give birth, it doesn't mean you have a motherly instinct. Just because you can have children doesn't mean you should. I will just say that. Just because you can have children, you physically can have children, you physically can reproduce, it doesn't mean you should have children. Because not everybody is made to be a parent. Not everybody is. Some people are just shit parents. Some people are just better off as like an aunt or an uncle. You come around for a short time and you visit and you leave a little present and then you leave. Some people are like that. They're not around for a lifetime. They're just around for a season. And so that's what it was with her mother. And so Red was like, basically confronting, her father. Like, well, do you think Hannah's, or do you think Cassidy, not Hannah, do you think Cassidy's going to be a bad mother because her mother wasn't in her life? And he's like, no. And he's like, well, then why do you think I'm going to be a bad dad? Just because my father was shit. It doesn't mean you're going to follow the same path. So yeah, her father pissed me off. Yeah, it says, now there was some good stuff in the middle, but just when I thought Cassidy was going to change and be a better person, she ends up cutting off all communication with Red after a fight and proceeds to exclude him from doctor's appointments and does the nursery with her asshole father. Red clearly was hurt by this, and her saying a simple sorry was not good enough because that whole month apart, Red was busy working on a space just for her to have when the baby arrives. What a perfect example of the difference between a good person and a not good person. She wasn't good enough for him. I 100% agree. Cassidy was not good enough for Red. He deserved way better than what Cassidy was as a human. He deserved way better. Red was a good man who didn't deserve to have his self-esteem shit on even more. Yeah. Yep. I will say, though, I do want to read the first book, and I want to read the rest of the series, just to see how I like with the other characters. Because if this author is like like some other authors out there, where they love to shit all over main male characters. If this author does that, then this will be a no-go author for me. So I'm going to read the first book and see, and go from there. But the only saving grace in this was Red. Red was the saving grace in here. I loved his character. I loved his thoughts of like being a dad, and then he found out he was having a girl, and I was like, oh my God, this man is so sweet. He is the sweetest. She's shit, you know? She was shit. There were a few things that kind of made me chuckle about her, but I'd say half or majority of the book, she really infuriated me. It was Red that kept me going on in the story, because I really wanted to see, you know, I really wanted to see like the baby being born and like him being a dad and everything. I was just like, oh my God, that's so cute. Like seeing like dads with their kids is the sweetest, you know. I think it's so cute. I think it's so cute. Especially when they're good dads and they play games and all that stuff. It's so sweet. It's so sweet to see. So I definitely am a sucker for like seeing dads with their kids. It's so cute. So with Cassidy, like I said, I gave this book 4 stars. I still enjoyed it, but her and her dad, oh, even after like when Cassidy finally got like her head out of her ass, she was still trying to convince her dad like, hey, Red, you know, Chase, you know, because his name's Chase is a good man. Chase is good. And I'm like, yes, he's a good man. Why did it take you so freaking long to figure it out, girl? Yeah. So I'm like, I will get into the first book. I will read the first book. Eventually I'll get back into it. But oh, Cassidy and her dad. Yeah. So I don't want to keep going in. I'll move on to the next book. So the next book, it was Claire Kent. So this here is a part of a, it was a part of a Kickstarter called, was it After the End? And so it's basically how many authors? You got 8 authors that are all participating in this After the End event, where they did funding for Kickstarter. I put money into the Kickstarter in order to go and get their goal met, so they can go and print out hardcover books or paperbacks. I ended up ordering the paperback set. And so it comes with like, it's all like 8 novellas, and they're all based on like post-apocalyptic type of or dystopian type of, you know, setting. So you got all these different authors. So I put money in for Claire Kent. That was the only reason why I put money in, is because of her. All the other authors, I didn't give a shit about. No offense to the other authors. I don't care about the other authors. I only cared about Claire Kent because I wanted to read this book. So when it comes to this one here, you get the when you buy the package, I went and got them for the paperback books, but I also went and you end up getting not audiobooks, you end up getting ebooks. You end up getting ebooks with the purchase. So I ended up getting the ebooks, and it went through, you got to have a BookFunnel account. So once you go and get a BookFunnel account, which is free, it's easy to do. You go and download the PDF file or whatever what's called. You end up downloading the file onto the BookFunnel, and BookFunnel has it to where you can connect it to your Kindle. And so I basically took the BookFunnel downloads and transfer them over to my Kindle. And so I read this one here, Brood, on my Kindle. And so, like I said, it's all basically based on dystopian. I will get to those other authors because I paid for the books. So I will get to those other ones. I want to check out the Sherry Thomas one because there's one that's got Sherry Thomas. And then also, I think Elizabeth Stevens. That's another one. But otherwise, one had Allie Hazelwood, and I'm like, I do not like Allie Hazelwood. I'll read the novella, but I'm like, I have a feeling I'm not going to like it, you know? And one had Adriana Herrera, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm going to like her as an author, but I'm like, I'll check out the book. But I will end up reading all of the novellas. It's whenever I get to them, you know? But like I said, the first one I definitely wanted to get to was the Claire Kent one. So, if you wanted to be a part of the Kickstarter, that is over with. But if you do wait, I believe all of these novellas will eventually be available to the authors again, to where they can go and put them out, you know? So if, say, you weren't able to get to the Kickstarter because you couldn't afford it, I think mine I paid for was like $140, something like that. So if you weren't able to do the Kickstarter, if you wait longer, like I think maybe sometime next year or so, that I would say the ebooks, you know, might be a bit available. I'm not sure about actual paperback books, but I believe possibly the ebooks or audiobooks will be available for other people to listen to if they want to. So, and I have a feeling I probably won't keep all these books, so I might end up like selling some of them. We'll see. We'll see how I like the stories. But anyways, this one here, Brood, is very similar to her Kindle series. I'll just say that. It's very similar to the Kindle series, especially because you have, like, I would say, characters that you recognize toward the end that you're like, wait a minute, I know this person. That person's a part of the Kindle series. This one here definitely reminded me of, and someone else said it too, this one here reminded me of like Fallout, but with a romance. If anybody's ever watched the show Fallout, it's based on a video game. So you have these people that all live in this underground bunker area. It was after, basically they got there before impact. They knew this asteroid was going to hit, and so they all went underground, which will probably happen if there is anything like that ever happening on Earth. You know, the rich people are probably going to make it to the bunker. All us poor fucks are probably going to perish. So just letting you know, all of the rich assholes will probably have their own bunkers because they can afford it. So yeah. So this one here has Cadence 21, and he goes by Chief Will 37. So we got an age gap, breeding kink, and it's dystopian. So we have like the content warning in here is you got male characters fighting. So we got Cadence and Danny have been intended for each other since they were little. They all live in an underground facility where everyone has jobs. And when the women turn 21, they are married off to men who will genetically be more likely to reproduce with, because it is more difficult to have children down there. You know, like when you think about it, being down in a bunker, you know, it's going to affect you physically and mentally. physically, because, you know, we're meant to get sunshine, you know, like, so we're not getting vitamin D and everything like that. So you're going to have to like get vitamin D in some other way, because, you know, we need to have sun. So we have to hit, you know, we got to get and end up getting sunshine and all that stuff. You can have artificial light, but it's not the same as actual sun. And also mentally, it could make you squirrely, you know, because, you know, there's a whole thing, it's called cabin fever, where if you're inside too long, you kind of go kind of nuts. That's pretty much what it is here. It's like you have some people who end up kind of like snapping and end up having to be put in like a facility, you know. So they're looking for whoever has the best genes to reproduce. So Cadence and Danny were close to their marriage when suddenly Vanessa, a woman who worked in the kitchen, collapses from a heart attack. The people running the facility tell Cadence that it would be best for her to marry Chief Will, who was Vanessa's husband. And Cadence and Danny aren't happy about it, but they deal with it when the time comes. They basically have to, you know, go with the fact of they have to be separated now. So Cadence and Will get married, and at first it's just a relationship of them to create a child, but the more time they spend with each other, the more they develop feelings. And it's dangerous to show their feelings because the people running the facility don't want emotional entanglements with the residents. It says, so Cadence and Will have to hide their feelings for one another. Then Cadence becomes pregnant and more secrets about the facility are revealed. This is an onion book. And when I say onion book, it has layers, deeper layers than you anticipate. So this one here had more stuff going on than you anticipated. And like I said, reminded me of Fallout. If you've watched Fallout, you know there were other things going on in that facility than just them living in Mayberry, okay? So there was other shit that went down. So I said, I enjoyed this book. It reminded me a lot of the show and video game Fallout, where everything seems picture perfect in the underground facilities, but obviously it holds darker secrets. I also loved how you could see how this couple wanted to show their love and how they loved their baby. Yeah, like, you know, I don't want to give too much away because it'll spoil too much of the plot in here, but there comes a time when they first, you know, like I said, at first it's kind of like more of a transactional thing, more of a let's you know, like make this baby and kind of like go about our business and everything. And so they first kind of like things are very awkward, but as time progresses, they start to develop more feelings for each other. They like each other, but they, like I said, they can't really show it, you know, like not in public and all that stuff. So they try to show it more of like in private, in their own room and everything like that. And then she ends up, you know, after like them going through how many months of her not getting pregnant, she finally ends up getting pregnant. And so now they're like a little bit more emotional because now she's finally pregnant. And so her pregnancy is like, she's not really dealing with like it being great. Like she kind of deals with like some stuff. And it comes to a point where they're like, they don't want to be in the facility anymore. They don't want to be underground anymore. You know, so that's about all I'm going to say about that. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it reminded me a lot of Fallout. So I was definitely getting Fallout vibes with that book. But yeah, I really enjoyed that one. It has like basically the same type of like flair that Claire Kent is really, you know, good at when it comes to her books and everything like that. Like a lot of times, a lot of the couples usually kind of get intimate like fairly quickly, but their intimacy ends up like their sexual relationship ends up turning into more intimacy, and they develop more feelings when it comes to that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was still kind of like the same type of feel of like the Kindled series, but it had a little bit more going on, like I said, because it had that more Fallout vibes and stuff. So there was definitely, I felt like a little more danger to them as a couple. And them wanting to protect their baby and everything, and it was sweet. Like at the end, I really enjoyed the end. I really enjoyed the end parts. They're really sweet. They were really sweet at the end. I really enjoyed those ones right there. And like I said, toward the end, you definitely see some other characters pop in, and you're like, oh wait, you know? So yeah, you definitely have to read it to the end. But yeah, this is another one where obviously it's a big age gap. He's older. He's kind of more of the strong silent type. Doesn't try to show like many feelings, which obviously when you are in that type of situation, you can't really show feelings. And also she was a different character because her character, no matter what it was that happened like in birth, she had like this white hair, like really white hair. It was very distinctive. And so it kind of made her almost kind of like a social pariah. You know, some people kind of look at her weird because of her hair being that way. And also like you start questioning things like, well, why are some of these people like disappearing? What's happening with why is this person who seems very healthy having a heart attack? You know? So yeah, I don't want to give in more information about that, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. And yeah, it definitely had the same type of feel as like similar vibes to like, you know, Kindle, the Kindle series and everything like that. I love how she's like extending this, you know, like kind of like universe, like more and more and everything like that. Extending this world out because I really did not want the Kindle series to end. So I love how she's kind of like expanding from it. So I do like that. But this one here definitely, I would say, is very similar to the Kindle series. And you probably could put it with the Kindle series, you know, with right next to each other. And be all right, you know. I would say though that if you wanted to, you could read this as a standalone and it wouldn't, you know, affect anything. But I definitely would say like you should check out the Kindle series because it helps kind of give a lot of like the backstory of like what happened with the world and all that stuff and everything like that. It's good to like know all that stuff too. Since I've read the Kindle series, it kind of like helps me a little bit more. But yeah, this one definitely had layers. It's definitely an onion book. So but yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I said, there was a couple other books that I've read. One I'm actually reading right now for a vlog. Crap. Excuse me. I am reading one for a vlog right now. So I'll end up talking about those at another time. And I did have some DNFs. So I'll talk about those. I'll probably talk about those in November. Yeah, I'll talk about those in November. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this video here. Have you read anything this month that you really enjoyed? Let me know down below in the comment section of what you enjoyed this month for a book. Or did you watch anything that was really good? I'll just say, like, before I leave, I did watch, what are they called again? They were Spanish movies. Obviously, I'm gonna say Spanish because I believe they were made in Spain. And they were based on a book series from this one author. And it was basically young people. It was like a sibling relationship. I can't remember the name of it. It's like Culpa Mia or something like that. Culpa Mia, Culpa Tuya. I don't know. I'm not good at Spanish. I'll just say that. I know English and bad English. I'm not good at Spanish. Culpa Tuya, maybe? And then it was like Culpa Nostra, something like that. And it was 3 movies, all with the same couple. And you had where she was like 17 and she moves in with her mother into like a stepfather's house. Her mother got married. And so now she's getting to know her stepbrother, who's like a little bit older than her. He's obviously an adult, and I was kind of like, he's messing with a 17-year-old. So I'm like, I'm not really happy about that. But the laws in Spain may be different. Like 16 may be the age of consent. I don't know. So I'm not going to judge it too much because I know the laws are different in other countries and stuff. I know, like, I think the age that people can drink in, like, Europe, I think, and it might be the same with Spain, is like 18. So when you're 18, you can drink. And I'm like, here it's 21. So if you come here, you got to wait till you're 21, even if you are like, even if you are from Europe and you've already drank alcohol, sorry, man, you can't drink until you're 21 here. So I wish all of it was 21 just to be, you know, because I think 18 is too young to drink. You know, like wine, I think it's a different thing. You know, if you drink wine, I think it's okay. But alcohol, like hard alcohol, you should not be drinking at 18. You're still developing, like you're still growing. So I think like 21, I would even say even older. I would say like 25. If I had my way, I would say nobody could drink until they're 25, because then your brain is like, it's not growing still. Like, you know, when you're 21, your brain is still developing, it's still growing, so it doesn't stop until you're 25. So I think like 25 probably should be like when you could drink. How many people are gonna be like, oh hell no? So so for me, if I had my way, it'd be 25, you know. It'd be 25, and then like smoking at like 21. So but that's just me. I think 18's too young. But I watched those movies and I thought they were good. I actually enjoyed them. I'd say the second one wasn't as good as the first and the third one. And it was a bit cliched. There was some cheesy drama to it too. But you know what? It's based on a book. So I'm like, that's why. It's based on like a romance book. So I'm like, yeah, there's going to be some tropey stuff in it. So, but I did enjoy those ones. I did enjoy them. And what else was it? I finished off season 2 of Poker Face. I really liked that one. I thought that was really well done at the end of season 2. I really enjoyed that one. And there really wasn't much else, I think, that I've watched. Or I haven't really watched a lot this month. Same thing with last month. I didn't really watch a lot. But yeah, that's it for this video here. If there's anything that you've watched, let me know in the comment section. Anything you've read that you really enjoyed, let me know down there. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I'll see you all on the next video. All right, bye.